Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to episode 2 of the Lyft HV Remote Roundtable from Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress. A new episode of this Remote Roundtable is available every Wednesday at noon, featuring conversations surrounding professional development, leadership, communication, and connection. I'm Evan Menist. I am the campaign manager for Elijah Reichlin-Melnick, who's running for New York State Senate in District 38, including parts of Rockland County and Westchester County. I am previously a research planner who worked at Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress until recently when I joined Elijah's campaign. And I am happy to be here today moderating this panel discussion about working remotely. In response to this global pandemic and the need to practice social distancing, many businesses have had to pivot to remote work environments. Office workers have had to make significant changes in the way that they work, with their only access to offices, managers, and coworkers through the use of technology. But some companies have been providing remote work opportunities for years, and there are those who are seasoned professionals, collaborating with the teams from across great distances. Today, we'll talk with a few of these professionals to learn some best practices for our new remote environment. Joining me today is Sean Dague. Sean has been a software engineer for the last 2 decades. He currently is part of the IBM quantum computing team. And in that time, he's led software development efforts with a variety of remote teams spanning the globe and different companies. He created the local HV Open Technology Meetup 17 years ago for a monthly forum on open source software in the Hudson Valley. He also leads the Mid-Hudson South chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, working to pass federal climate policy through direct engagement of policymakers by everyday citizens in their districts. Next, I also have with me Carrie Pfeffer. Carrie is a product owner with Principal Specialty Benefits Division, specializing in the customer journey for individual disability income insurance and collaborating with teams from all over the world. And also we have Renée Garrin. Renée is the owner of Renée the VA. Renée is a virtual assistant specializing in content development and management. She helps business owners stay on top of the heaps of content they need to create and deliver in order to stay consistent and active with their online marketing. Thank you all so much for being here. Okay, so let's kick this discussion off. First and foremost, let's just go around. We'll have everybody say hello, say a word about themselves, and just talk a little bit about how long you've been working remotely. Let's get started with Renée.
My name is Renée Garrin from Renée the VA, and my journey began back in September of 2011. But I should tell you just a little bit prior to that. 4 years prior to that, I had gone through a divorce with my then 3-year-old daughter, and I was living in an area that didn't have a lot of work available. I was fortunate enough to find some work from a gentleman who worked out of his home in a marketing company for himself. But when he decided to close his business, I was kind of left from square one again. And I still wanted to be there for my daughter and be the parent that I wanted to be. So, they say necessity is the mother of invention. So I needed to create something that can help me work from home so that I can raise her the way I wanted to. And at the time, there was a term called virtual assistant that was becoming very popular within the entrepreneurial community. And I'm thinking, I have many years of administrative assistant experience, and I have some marketing and marketing research. So I said, well, maybe this is something I can tackle. And I basically just kind of taught myself, which was self-taught, all these different techie skills, because I would never consider myself a techie to start out with. So that's kind of something that I'd like to encourage everyone in this now new environment, that you can teach yourself these skills. Like, it is possible, because if I could do it, anybody can do it. And, I've been working in this setting for quite some time, and I'm constantly educating myself, and it's been a great experience for me. And now my daughter is 16, so it's been a journey. but it's now that we're in these times, it's a little bit easier to grasp what's going on now.
Thank you very much for sharing. Carrie, you want to jump in on the same question? The type
Sure.
of remote work that you do and how long you've been doing it?
Sure. So I actually started my career with Principal in Des Moines, Iowa, where the company is based. And when I decided that I needed to move home to be closer to my family because everybody was moving back, I decided that I needed to come back as well. So I talked to my employer and they wanted me to stay, but we had this kind of conversation about what this would look like if I were to move home. What would my job look like? So we tested it out for a couple of months while I was in Des Moines. I worked remotely full time. And then I was able to actually take my job with me when I came back to New York in the Hudson Valley. I'm a product owner, so I work with our IT teams, and I'm a translator between our business group, kind of determining what they need for their admin systems to best do their jobs and help our end customers, and our IT teams. I do work with teams all over the globe currently. My time zone shift from Des Moines to New York really does help because I get an extra hour overlap before Des Moines starts in the morning.
So that's definitely good to have.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Sean, how about you?
Yeah, so Sean Dague. My remote, kind of full-time remote journey started in 2013. So in 98, I graduated college. I got a job with IBM. I moved to the Hudson Valley as part of that and was in both Fishkill and Poughkeepsie sites over the years. In 2013, I left IBM and went to work for Samsung and later HP, and just, you know, was doing all my work from a home office from that point. They were both based out of California, and the roles I took on was just full-time from home, getting on a plane maybe a couple times a year to go meet the team. I came back to IBM in 2016, end of 2016, and the original role that I took there in this developer advocate organization was, again, we were all over the country. Everyone was fully remote as part of that effort. I joined the quantum computing team just over a year ago, and most of the team is based in Yorktown, although there are chunks in Spain and Tokyo and everywhere else. Even after that join, I was going down to Yorktown like one day a week from here in LaGrange, which is about an hour drive, but 4 days a week was fully at home. And being in technology space, what you find is that most of your communication interaction is through the screen to begin with. So this, in some ways, it was pretty natural to just be doing that from a different place. And just one last final thought as we think about this, unusual time that we're in, where everyone is now trying this new practice of not working from the places they were used to, is realizing we're not just all working from home now. We're working from home in a crisis. It is different, and you have to be forgiving of yourself about what it means to work in a crisis, and not just working from home.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's clearly a really good point. Everybody has to remember that we're under a very unique set of circumstances right now, and not only are we working remotely, but we're learning to work remotely without the ability to, run back to the office to grab that one thing we forgot, or go into the office on the weekend to get some extra work done that we weren't planning to do. Right? You can never escape your newfound coworkers, whether they be your cat or your dog or your spouse or your children, and that can sometimes get a little stressful, for sure. So thank you. So moving on, I want to ask a couple other questions as well. In that vein, obviously, the three of you have learned to work remotely prior to the public health crisis that we're currently experiencing. As you made that transition into remote work, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in transitioning to remote work? And, what are some of the key things that you learned during that transition that might be able to help people who were certainly not prepared to make a transition to remote work right now? So let's switch it up the order a little bit this time. We'll start with Carrie, if that's okay.
Sure. So when I first went remote, I I took it upon myself to schedule just recurring time with my leader, with some of my team members. You really have to be proactive about reaching out to people. It's not like you can just have a conversation in the hallway. I have noticed since everybody else is working remotely now, all of our meetings start on time, which is nice. And they end a little sooner too. So schedule time to reach out to people. Don't just send them an email, send them a text, send them an IM. If you have that capability, call them, maybe text them first if you want to call them, but make sure you're communicating and reaching out.
That's great advice. Yeah, I can imagine, it's definitely not something that people would immediately think of, but use every type of communication that's available to you, right? So text, call, email, because maybe that informal text replaces your, running into each other at the water cooler type of conversation that you were used to. Sean, how about you? Biggest challenges shifting to remote work and some key takeaways that you've learned.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest things I remember from the first few months of fully shifting over was you have to be really diligent about understanding when your day ends, because there's not the same natural signals that like everyone else has left and I shouldn't be here anymore either.
Yeah.
And that's especially true if you have maybe a less full house of people. Like you have to just decide my day is ending at this point and that's it, right? And walk away. I definitely had challenges of it's really easy to overwork when you're at home because there's not that like barrier there in the same way. With that, it's really valuable if you can set aside a dedicated space within your house of this is where I work from, and not just like all over the rest of your spaces, because that is also very helpful in like a mental segmentation of, this is where I do work and this is where I relax and I'm with family and other things. So that again, you can just like get out of a work brain model. And I think, the point being made of being really cognizant of going and checking in with people, right? Like, especially recently where a lot of my team was all in an office, but there's a chunk of us that weren't and we're all over. It's totally okay to just be like, hey, let's do an ad hoc, like get on video for the next 20 minutes and just check in and say hi, right? Like simulate in some ways what running into each other for coffee ends up being like. And that's fine, right? Social is important. Social is how we build our bonds.
Yeah, that's really good feedback too. I was actually having a conversation before we started this stream with one of my former colleagues from Pattern for Progress, and how they had a coffee chat with another former colleague of mine. They just hopped on Zoom for 20 minutes, kind of ad hoc, and said, hey, they each had a cup of coffee from their respective living rooms and, just chatted about things that were going on. And, it's important to kind of remember to try and keep having those little personal conversations and relationships maintained. That's great. So Renée, same question over to you. Biggest challenges shifting to remote work. What's something that you've learned from working remotely?
One of the challenges was really to stay self-motivated, because it's just you. This is for me personally. I don't have a team, it's just myself. So I need to create the structure. I need to create the space, as was mentioned before. Like even if it was just a corner in the living room, that was where I did my work. That's where I went to work. And you become more self-reliant, and you're in charge of your own schedule. I mean, this is for me. So I didn't have, I mean, I have clients, yes, that I need to work for, but I need to be the one who says, okay, you know, it's time to get up and you have to get dressed and you go to work, right? So it's keeping that schedule and being held self-accountable basically for that. And I really learned how to compartmentalize. So what was mentioned as well is having like a dedicated time for work and then maybe a dedicated time where you shut down and you say, okay, I'm done. You know, I've worked, you know, for my clients now, and you learn how to set boundaries and, you know, what are your work hours and when can you contact me? And now the time is family time, you know, now it's my downtime. And that is a skill to learn to compartmentalize that, because things can get blended, but you end up getting better at it because you realize how crucial it is. And also minimizing distractions. I've learned to do that. So in terms of saving personal social media, I don't keep any of those notifications on at all during the day so that I don't go down a rabbit hole, which is very easy to do. So I keep that off. You know, even setting boundaries with people that I know, personal friends, think, oh, you work from home. I could just call you whenever and you can just, you know, talk to me. And it's not like that. You know, so just saying, you know what, I'll get back to them later when I have time and can give them the attention that I'd like to give them. And I think, like I said, just maybe compartmentalizing and noticing like what is your work day and what is your downtime was important.
Yeah, certainly. So in that same vein, I'd like to ask the three of you, you know, we've established that it's incredibly important to set those boundaries, give yourself parameters, timeframes for when you're going to work, when you're not going to work. I know personally, it's been one of the most difficult things moving to a completely remote work schedule, is to, you know, figure out when I'm working on what. And it's something that I'm definitely still struggling with on a daily basis. You know, last night I was on a work call at 10:45 at night, and my wife was like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, you know, it has to get done. It has to get taken care of, right? But then I can find myself in the middle of the day, in the afternoon, you know, doing something for myself. And, you know, it all shakes out to a reasonable amount of hours for work and a reasonable amount of hours for play. But I do find myself having a difficult time, you know, compartmentalizing it and not just blending work and play and leisure throughout the day. So what are some strategies, what are some tools maybe that you've used that have helped you, you know, set those boundaries, learn the skill of compartmentalizing and force yourself to schedule those times and stick with those scheduled times? Because I think a lot of people need to know how they can learn to do those things very quickly. So let's start with Sean on this one.
I don't know that I've got any particular like magic here. The one thing that I realized once I started going fully remote was that actually my best hours of the day are sort of like, I get up early. So my best hours of the day are kind of like 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. And when I had to go to an office, like it basically broke all of my good hours. And so actually working from home, it was like, oh, I can get up, make a cup of coffee, go. And like that first 4 hours of the day is gold for me. That's when I'm most productive. And then, but that means I've started at a very early day. And so then in the middle of the day, just sort of getting a cadence of like, that means that there's a break. And that means, you know, a time to go get some exercise, a time to like, you know, go poke my head outside. Like, and that's fine, right? So it's like a morning chunk, a midday break, and an afternoon chunk. And that like works very well for me. I have wife and my daughter's 5 years old, and I'm on the hook for dinner at least half the time. So I do have a pretty clear like 4:30, my day's gotta be winding down because we have to, you know, get dinner on the table. So that I didn't always have that when I got started of this like hard end day, but for the last few years I have, and so that's been very useful just to be like, this is when family transition happens.
Great. Renee, we'll go back to you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, my husband and I both have lifestyles that are home-based. And we both have our own schedules. He is also an early bird, like you mentioned, and he gets up a little bit earlier than I do, and he has his routine. And then, but like I felt that just whatever you do, you stay consistent. So so then I'll get up, and then we'll talk and have our intentions for the day, and then I make sure I work out in the morning, and I make sure I shower, and it just mentally and physically prepares you for a work day. And then, as you said, you might want to take a break at lunch. We take lunch together. We might do a walk, get a little exercise. And then I try and stop by 5 so I can make dinner, so that it seems like that there is some consistency in the day. And everyone's different with their time. Some people might work better in the later evenings. And that's fine. It's whatever works for you. It's just consistency is key. And when this whole started, yes, we already had our routines in place, and we just made sure that we kept them in place so that we wouldn't feel as overwhelmed, because this is a very stressful and overwhelming time. And just having that consistency and the routines just saves you. And in terms of any special magic pill, I'm not sure I have one either. I mean, I like to keep, there's calendars. Like I would suggest even scheduling anything on the calendar that you want to do, even if it's calling back a friend, or, I'm going to, walk around the block. Just write it down or put it in your Google Calendar. And once it's there, it's there. So it's plans, and then there's no excuse, and you did it, and then you could feel accomplished. And, it helps to plan your day that way too.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Carrie?
Absolutely. I'm going to echo a lot of what Renee and Sean both said. You have to find what works best for you. With my particular schedule, I usually get up first thing in the morning. It's 5:30 when I'm hopping on phone calls or team meetings to some of our global locations. And then I work until about 10:30 my time, and my Des Moines partners are getting online. So I take my first break about 10:30, and then I try to come back probably around 11:30, work a couple more hours, and then I like to finish up like my email. I try to get through at least reading my emails by the end of the day. So usually a half an hour to 45 minutes in the evening as well, because I'm picking up again for the next day for our global partners. Get into a routine, put it on the calendar, even if it's 15 minutes. It's so helpful and it's so important. Make sure you're stepping away from your computer. If you have a workstation at home and you have your desk, that's great, but that's not your normal routine. If it's anything like the offices that I've worked in, you're usually up, walking around. Take your laptop with you. Go sit on the couch and answer emails. Go stand at the kitchen counter while your coffee's brewing. Just find something that works best for you and make sure you're taking those breaks.
Yeah, that's great advice all the way around. Thank you all for that. And so I guess, another part of this question is, favorite apps or programs, different tools that you're using that you've found to be successful with staying connected, not just with your coworkers and work and your clients, but also with family and friends. I know personally I use a very different set of tools and technologies for keeping in touch with friends and family right now that I do with working with my client, as well as with connecting with, other people that I need to connect with for work. The only tool I think that really overlaps all of them right now, which has kind of become a household name all of a sudden, is Zoom. Other than that, there are, quite a few other technologies that I'm using, but I'm curious to hear, from all of you, what tools do you prefer for connecting to family, for friends, and for work? So we'll start this one off with Carrie.
For work, we're using the Microsoft suite. We have Microsoft Teams and a couple of different others. We moved away from Skype a couple of years ago. All of those apps within Microsoft have been a huge help to us. We had one office that was a global office. They actually did not have any remote workers at all. And when this pandemic was declared, it actually turned out that within 3 days, everybody had been issued a laptop and was working from home full time. So it was a huge response and a very quick one, but those apps have saved us there. So we have Microsoft Teams. It's so good. On a personal level, I use Instagram and Facebook. I'm a big fan of FaceTime. I have nieces and nephews that I like to FaceTime and make sure that I'm getting that FaceTime in with them. We've also done Zoom happy hours with some of my friends just to make sure that we're still talking and having that connection.
Great. Sean, how about you?
Yeah, so it was actually one of the big differences when I came back to IBM in 2016 was their entire technology for collaboration that they were using had changed out in the 3 years I was gone. So we use Slack a lot. Like, I believe are one of the biggest installations of Slack in the world. And so that is just like daily flow, and works really well for chatting, connecting. On a regular basis, I'm using like 3 different video platforms. Slack itself has embedded video within it. We use WebEx a lot at work. And then I use Zoom a lot because actually Citizens Climate Lobby is a largely remote organization, even the national portion, and had been using Zoom for years as a way to connect to volunteers and do things. So I'd been familiar with that for like the last 3 years, and so as we got into this, I just started using that a lot more. Like we've done family sort of happy hours, and with local friends, we've done a few happy hour events, which has been fun to stay connected. So yeah, I mean those are most of it, right? Like text on Slack, and then video to kind of fill in the real time stuff.
How about phone calls? I mean, you making any phone calls? I feel like
I honestly
going right to video chat.
I have almost whenever I can, I push things over to video because that was working at a big company. I used to have days where I would have 8 different conference calls years ago, right? And it's fine, but in video, the thing that's really good about it is that you can get some immediate feedback as to whether or not the person on the other side has any idea what you're talking about, or if you've confused them, or like, oh yeah, we're on the same page, right? You get those visual cues, and so it's just a lot more engaging. So almost any time it's like, oh, we need to talk about this, it's just like, okay, let's go on video somewhere and do it that way.
Yeah. How about you, Renée? I know you have a lot of clients that you're working with and across all different time zones, and so I'm interested to hear how you're staying connected with everybody.
Yeah, well, I'm echoing what Sean is saying too with the visual cues. I was just talking about this yesterday, that I actually do prefer to talk with someone on video than on a phone call, because you're not 100% sure what's going on the other end. Right. But he had mentioned Slack, and that is one tool. I do have one client that likes to use Slack, and it takes the place of email because your email threads can get all bogged up, and Slack, everything just kind of stays in one spot. And I use the project management app called Asana, and that organizes your tasks for different projects, and you can assign them to different clients, or they assign you tasks. So that keeps people organized. And Google Docs. We like to use Google Docs is actually a great tool, and all of the different things they've got going on in there. And Zoom, of course, and I am way overdue for a Zoom happy hour, so I got to get my peeps on that for sure.
How about for connecting to family?
You know what? I actually do still lots of texting too. I mean, and I know that there is some Facebook messaging, and yes, there's Instagram, but I do lots of text and play with emojis, and I sometimes it's quicker and easier for me to do it that way. And then I might send a pic of something that happened that day, and it's sometimes it's just easy. You know, I was connecting with my stepmom daily, you know, every day, and just even a quick check-in text, you know, makes you feel connected and loved and during this time that's stressful. So
Yeah.
that helps.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat here, using a lot of the same tools that you're all using. A lot of Facebook to stay connected with family and friends. And you know, one good takeaway from this crisis is I'm actually connecting with my family more. You know, it's really interesting for me. You know, my parents and my brother and his wife live like an hour and 15 minutes from me, so like not far. So I see them often, right? Every couple of weeks, generally, I would be seeing them. But now, obviously, since we're not seeing each other, you know, I would call my mom once a week, kind of thing, check in, et cetera, and texts here and there. But now I feel like we're doing video chats with my family members, you know, twice a week, and I'm just talking with all of them and seeing all of them more. And it's just, you know, it kind of feels like, because we've been forced to be apart, we're all getting much closer to each other through technology, and making us use that technology more often, which I imagine is going to be a continued thing moving forward. You know, there's no reason why we weren't FaceTiming more often. Just, you know, life is crazy, and there's always the excuse of like, oh, I'm so busy, everything's going on. But I think one thing that we're learning from this crisis is, you know, there's definitely time to check in more often. So that's one good takeaway that I've had, at least. And for work, another tool that I'm using, I know, I don't remember who mentioned it, but the Google tools are great. Was that you, Renee? I think.
Yeah, Google Docs and the Google Suite, and there's all different slides.
Yeah, so I use the Google Suite for everything. I try to keep my costs down now as an independent contractor, so I haven't actually bought a license to Microsoft Office yet. So Google Docs is getting the job done for me. But I've also been using Google Hangouts, which is another good tool for video and text chatting for anyone who is looking for a free tool for that. So that's great. I think, you know, we've touched on a lot of different things today. Really appreciate you guys taking your time out and giving us all of this information. And so I just, you know, before we go, I want to kind of go around the circle here one more time and just see if there's anything else that we've missed, something that you want to make sure to leave people with who listen to the conversation today, that, you know, they can take with them to help them in their new journey, working and living remotely. So we'll just start off with Carrie, and then we'll hit Sean and Renee, and we'll finish up.
My advice would be to make sure you're communicating with your friends, your family, and your coworkers. However you can reach out to those coworkers you used to see every day, whether it's social media, texting, calling, make sure you're doing that. In this time of crisis, the mental health toll that this is taking on all of us, even us remote workers with experience, it's very, very important that we're reaching out.
Great, thanks. Sean?
Yeah, I definitely echo that. That was, I was thinking about the texting question from earlier, because that's actually something I started doing, was like every day, like do a text check-in with someone that I haven't talked to in a while, just to be like, you know, reach out, like make sure, how are things going? A lot of asking that. Anytime we do team calls at work now, you know, you start with like, how are people doing? And like, give it 5 minutes, right? Like, that's cool. We'll get to tasks when we get to tasks, but it's important to like check in as everyone as humans. And I think that's like one of the most important things right now, is to realize, like, yes, everyone's making these big transitions in their lives because of the crisis, but also that there's a crisis going on, and like that is weighing heavily mentally on all of us, right? Even those of us that had a routine before any of this. And you just have to be like empathetic towards yourself and others about the fact that, like, you know, not everyone's not as productive as they used to be. Like, that's what happens in a crisis, like that, and that's okay. Giving people space for that.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Thank you, Sean. Renee?
Absolutely. What they both said was wonderful. And I just think this time too is really about self-care and be kind to yourself. And whatever that means for you, you could set up your routine and you can have a template in place, but even on the normal days that we used to have, sometimes your days don't always go as planned, and that's totally okay. Just taking care of yourself, keeping yourself healthy, getting enough sleep, like basic things can totally help you through this. And it's really just not beating yourself up, being as kind as you can to yourself. Know that everyone is transitioning to this in their own way, and to give yourself a break and not be so hard on yourself. And, we're all going to get through this together, and the support that this is in this community and everywhere I've been seeing is really promising and hopeful. So I'm just wishing the best for everyone, for sure.
Thank you very much. And so just to wrap up, I just want to thank everyone, thank all the panelists. I hope you can hear the applause from the people watching from their living rooms and bedrooms, etc., across New York, maybe across the country. But yes, thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Renee, very much for being here. Really appreciate it. Big thank you to Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress and the team over there for putting this together and continuing this series of webinars every Wednesday at noon as we continue to work remotely. Hopefully everybody can take something away from the conversation today and put that to use in your own life with your family, with your friends, with your coworkers. And I think, really appreciate the big takeaways of remembering to, take care of yourself as you, learn how to work better remotely, because it is a difficult process. I know I've been doing this for a few months more than most of you, but I still haven't quite figured it out yet. So it will take a lot of time and cut yourself some slack. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing more of you on Zoom happy hours or Google Hangouts sometime soon. So thanks everybody. Take care.
Designate a space for work. It helps with the mental segmentation between work and home. You have to be able to walk away from work when it's time to end for the day. Minimize distractions. Distractions cut into both your productivity and your presence. Turn off personal notifications for social media and email, personal texts, and phone calls while you're working, and turn off your work notifications while you're enjoying your personal time. The beauty of remote work is that you can capitalize on your best hours of the day since you're free from the traditional office hour paradigm, which means very high productivity on your own terms. You'll have to find overlap with your colleagues' work schedules for meetings, and in our current environment, you'll have to work around your home office mates too. It is important to clearly define your time by scheduling work time, appointments, meetings, and phone calls on your calendar, but also clearly block out your personal time too, and stick to it. Create structure for yourself. Get into the routine that helps to define your day, whether it's waking up to that first cup of coffee and going straight to work with a long midday break for exercise, or a schedule that begins with personal time and then addresses work tasks mid-morning. Find what works for you and make it a daily ritual so that your work and personal time has clearly defined boundaries, so you can create a work-life balance. Step away from your computer. Your normal routine in an office doesn't generally mean being glued to a desk all day. When working in a designated workspace at home, get up and walk around from time to time. Experience a change of scenery. Sometimes it really helps to change locations when you need to shift gears to a different type of task. Take your laptop with you to a new location to answer those emails. Communicate. You have to be proactive about reaching out to people. You don't have the opportunity to bump into each other in the hallway. Social interaction is so important, so you have to create it in the virtual space. Schedule time with people. Check in. Video meetings, text, call, instant message. Schedule one-on-one time with your manager and your colleagues to build those bonds within your remote workplace, and spend time with your friends in the same ways. Get out of your email. instant messaging systems for in-office communication can provide major relief from email overwhelm, so find one that works for your organization. Be really diligent about understanding when your workday ends. You don't have the in-office end-of-day signals to help you close down, so you really have to find some ways to keep your work within the confines of a time frame. It is really easy to overwork when you work from home. Be kind to yourself and others. We have difficult, unproductive days in the best of times, and these are really challenging times. We're all learning. Be kind.